Hello, Heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel Podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the Witch's Wheel of the Year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Welcome in or welcome back, my fabulous freaks, my hedonic heathens, my weird witches. Hi, thanks for joining me here on the podcast, either for your first time or once again. Whatever it is, here we are. We are not going to mess around too much at the beginning of today's podcast. We are going to jump directly into the stuff. We have some interesting things going on this week, don't we always? But first, of course, there's a little bit of a preamble. What do we have coming up? We have a tarot circle coming up soon. We have another Wheel of the Year class coming up soon. If you want more information on that stuff, you can check out my website. You can join my newsletter on my website, which is free, irregularly produced, and will get you a discount code. You can also join my Patreon. Thanks, patrons. You might want to know, this is, hooray, insert one of those weird sound things. This is officially my 100th episode. What the fuck? Are you kidding? Yes, they have allowed me to do this 100 times in a row. And this is all thanks to the support of my patrons. You guys make it possible for me to not have a real job and do this instead. So, as I often say, this is actually your fault. If you're mad at anybody about it, talk to them. They did it. But yeah, man, what a wild milestone. 100 episodes. When I started this, I very much doubted my capacity to stick with it. I have always thought of myself as a person who has a very difficult time with consistency. I always want to change stuff. I always want to adapt things. Blame my stellium in mutable Sagittarius and my moon in mutable Virgo and my and right? Um I've got a few mutable placements in my chart, whatever. But there are times like this where I have to recognize, oh, maybe I do have some stick to itness in me somewhere. I have been teaching the Wheel of the Year classes more or less every 6 weeks for 8 years. I guess I do have some consistency somewhere in there. Somehow, some consistency leaked in. But that, be that as it may, when I started this, I definitely did not even want to think about hitting milestones like a 50th episode or a 100th episode or whatever. So it's really weird and really cool to be here. If you have been listening from the beginning, I would love feedback from folks who have been around for a long time on how you have felt about the changes, how you've liked the various versions of this podcast or didn't like them. And if you're new here, if this is your first time listening, welcome. Hi, come on in, sit down, make yourself at home. Kick your shoes off, grab something to drink. Or if you've only been listening for a short while, what is it that you love about this podcast? I'm always curious because I'm always trying to get better. If you're going to just tell me that I'm a piece of crap, all right, that's fair. But I do truly love constructive feedback. Hello, again, moon in Virgo. I really do. I'm a bit of a masochist when it comes to tell me what I'm doing wrong because I love to have the opportunity to fix it or change it or improve it or drop it. Right. But anyways, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being on this journey with me. Are we going to do another 100 episodes? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Who's going to stop me? Who could? Okay, sorry. All right. Okay, so anyways, yay, that happened. That's cool. Thanks so much. Moving on. I guess you might also say, if you think this podcast is absolutely fabulous, please support it. You can always drop me a tip in my tip jar on Venmo. Join Patreon to really support it. But another way to support this podcast is to leave a rating and or a review on whatever platform it is that you listen to this on or watch it on or whatever. Very, very appreciative of that support as well. Okay. Um, as I previously said, we've got classes coming up. Tarot Circle is an exclusive class for patrons as a means of me saying thanks to y'all. We have one coming up for this month at some point. I'll announce a date soon. And towards the end of the month, we will have another Wheel of the Year class for the upcoming Sabbat Lunasa, which is traditionally celebrated on August 1st. And so that will be a live stream on YouTube. I will have an actual date for you soon. I'll list it on my website. I will send out a newsletter about that. That will also be listed on Patreon. And also, you can subscribe to me on YouTube and get an announcement there when the next class is scheduled. That's enough of that. Let's move on. Okay. Where are we? We are officially Litha season, waning moon in Aries, lunar week 15 by some lunar calendars. And if you don't know what Litha is, go watch my Litha class on YouTube. It's up, it's free, it's 2 hours long. Go get some, kid. But the gist of it in this entire season, as we step into summer, step into Cancer season, step into Litha, is that our wheel has turned and we have moved out of the experimentation of spring and we have moved into the power and the responsibility and the commitment of summer and Litha season. And so our big words that we are working with as witches are things like power, transformation, healing, fertility, and commitment, responsibility, things along those lines. And so that's kind of our backdrop for whatever else it is that we're dealing with, whatever transits, whatever the moon is doing, whatever stuff is coming up for us, holy days, etc. That's the backdrop energetically for us. So that brings us to this week that we are talking about, wherein we have, as I have just mentioned, a waning moon in Aries. So let's talk about it. 6:47 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have our waning moon in Aries at 17 degrees. And the only aspect that it is making that I think is important is that it is conjunct Chiron at 19 degrees. So this is our portion of the process as we move through Litha, where we might start to get a little fired up about what's going on in our process, whatever that is. We might start to have some impatience with that process. We might start to feel some drive. We might start to feel some passion. We might start to feel like I'm ready to argue about this or fight about it, right? Those are all words that we naturally connect with Aries. Cool, plus, and however, we've also got Chiron in the mix, who has been slowly making its way through Aries for quite some time. So anybody that has Aries rising or any heavy placements, any important placements in Aries, you have had Chiron hanging out in the same house. Chiron in modern astrology represents loosely the sacred wound that we walk through life with. And a lot of times, Chiron represents a wound that we carry that we did not inflict on ourselves, that something like fate inflicted on us. And I hold that word very carefully. If you've been hanging out with me in classes and in the podcasts and stuff, you know that I have an ongoing dance with the word fate or the idea of destiny, right? Like I get it and it's interesting and it's cool, but I'm a big old fan of free will. And at the same time, I recognize that we live in a context, right? There was stuff going on before we were born. And some of that stuff determines what is happening in our life. And then I think we have free will about, what are we going to do about that? Anything, something, nothing. But like the fact that I was born in America sets me on a particular path. The fact that I was born with white skin sets me on a particular path. And then I have choices about what that path looks like. But Chiron represents some of the pain that we might be born into this life with. It can represent painful events, painful experiences that we have that are outside of our control, or definitely seem like they are outside of our control. It's just stuff oftentimes that just happened to us, and now we just have to deal with it. And it's pain, so we carry it, right? We learn from it, but sometimes what we learn is really funky, right? It can really warp us. And so anytime we are having a Chiron transit, or we're dealing with stuff going on with Chiron, it is stirring up this whole pot of information, experience, emotionality, psychological whatnottery, all of that. So this moon in Aries is already potentially impatient, ready to argue, ready to fight, ready to pout, right? Ready to be driven, ready to be passionate, ready to just like go get what it wants. And it's conjunct Chiron, which is like, I have a sore spot about this stuff. I have a wound around this stuff. I have sacred pain around this stuff. And what are we doing with it? What are we doing about it? When we are dealing with a waning moon, we are in the portion of the lunar process that is challenging us to recognize what needs to change. And by change, it might be adapt. And by change, it might be leave behind. And I say this every month when we have our waning moon, that adaptation, or that leaving behind thing that the moon is challenging us with, might be around stuff that's obviously not working. And it could also sometimes be around things that are working okay, but in fact are impeding our progress to getting to something that could work even better. So this moon can be really gratifying. This moon, the waning moon in any sign, can be something that's very like confirming. Like, yes, I knew this wasn't working. I knew it needed to change, and now I'm really feeling it, and it's really obvious. And here's the data coming back from my, experimentation, aka my life, and it's like, yes, this could change. This isn't working as well as it could, etc. We tried it. It was cool, but let's go on to something else. But it can also point to stuff that we are really hugging onto, that we're really clinging to, that we're really holding on to because it comforts us, because we're sentimental about it, because we're defensive about it. But in fact, from an objective point of view, from an outsider perspective, it looks like something that's like, yeah, that's cool. But if you let that go, your hands would be open to receive something even better, or create something even better. And yet that thing, that better thing, isn't here yet. So this moon can also ask for a lot of trust and a lot of like, let's leap off the cliff and hope we can fly kind of vibes. Um, and that is easy for Aries energy to do in terms of like, let's leap into the new adventure. But that can be very difficult for Aries energy when it comes to, I built this and I don't want to let it go because it's mine and I did it without anybody's help, right? Think about the Tower card. The Tower card is connected to the sign, or excuse me, connected to the planet Mars, and Mars is the ruling planet of Aries. So anytime we're dealing with Aries, maybe that's a stretch for some people magically, and I get that. This is not true in all magical systems, but it's true in the ones I work in. Anytime we're dealing with Aries, in the back of my mind, I always get a little flash of the Tower card of like, hey, don't let your ego ruin what is working here. Don't let your defensiveness bar you from healthy progress, even if it looks like we're taking some steps backwards. That's what's up with a waning moon for me. The moon is square to the sun, or the sun is square to the moon. Moon square to the sun, right? So it's a square, friction. But what do we say about a square? we say that squares point to where things are not working as well as they could, and with effort, we could seriously improve them and actually get really good at something. So, our squares in our lunar process, the waxing half and the waning half, are both opportunities for us to assess, consider, reorganize, recalibrate, and kind of think to ourselves like, hey, this was cool, could be better. This was crappy. Let me get it out of the way for something better, whatever. But again, with that Aries energy, with Chiron involved, this might feel very personal. This might feel at first like it's an attack from the universe on your cool thing that you built all by yourself. And how dare they? How very dare they? But in fact, this is a part of the progress of actually, let's improve. Okay. So, what does uh uh Raven Caldera have to say about this? We often talk about a book here on the podcast called Moon Phase Astrology by Raven Caldera, where Raven breaks down the moon into all of its different phases in all of the different signs. And it's really cool. I'm sure they are not the only author to do it. I probably should look for more books like this because I really like this concept. But the thing that they bring up basically is rage and pain, both from the people that are in our lives and from fate and from destiny itself. And so I thought, wow, how appropriate that it's this moon and it's conjunct Chiron, because that's what's up. That's what's up. That kind of stuff might be coming up for us all week long. We have a very interesting, note the quotation marks, interesting series of astro events, culminating in kind of a weird transit. And so this whole week might be a week of dealing with painful experiences or painful memories, painful conversations that feel very personal. And so, how, like, let's just know that right now, okay? And then recognize, think to ourselves, how can I hold myself in a loving and healthy way as I move through some experiences that might feel very personal and very painful? And they might not be personal, and they totally might be personal. There's a lot of family stuff coming up this week. I know. Hooray, right? And so when it's family stuff, it's often pretty personal. But because it happened to us, right? It was me. That was me. But is there any way that we can put ourselves in the feet of those other relatives, and think about their world perspective and what they might have been thinking when they said or did this or that? And then I will also fully acknowledge some people don't deserve that respect. Some people just don't deserve that level of empathy. But some do. And empathy is going to be a thing that we talk about here in just a second. So that's what's up. That's what's up with this moon. Okay. Side note to the side note of the side note. I'm around for consultations. You guys want to talk about it? Book with me. I'm here. Let's hang out. Let's talk about it. Let's find it in your chart and see what's going on, or pull some tarot about it as well. Okay. When we have our waning moon moving through Aries, for our lunar body work, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the head, the hair, the scalp, the eyes, and the sinuses. These are the parts of the body that are ruled by Aries. And I think I've forgotten to say this the last couple of episodes, but let me remind you all, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of the cauldron and of witchery. So I don't know jack shit about your healthcare routine. Check in with your trusted health advisors if you are wanting to incorporate any of this information, to make sure that it is right for you. And as I usually say every week, work with the metaphor. I think that the metaphor can be just as powerful as working with the physical elements here. So, is there something on your mind? Right? Literally, Aries rules the head. Is there something on your mind that you need to think about, that you need to get off your mind, that you need to move through or process or whatever? That stuff. Okay. For our plant body work with a waning moon in Aries, we are pulling weeds. We are cutting trees for firewood and lumber. We're plowing, cultivating. We're pruning trees and vines. We're doing pest and disease control. We are ethically harvesting below ground crops for eating, drying, or storing. We are fertilizing our plants Um, and we are fertilizing trees, perennials, and biennials. Chart for this moon is up in the notes for patrons at the Mercury level and higher, if you're wanting to take a look at that. So that brings us to the rest of the astrology for this day. And the rest of the astrology for this day is thus: Mercury in Cancer, trine Neptune retrograde in Pisces at 27 degrees. Now, the retrograde part I don't really care about. I'm just including that to be accurate. Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, all three spend anywhere from 4.5 to 6 months of the year in retrograde. So, in my opinion, it kind of doesn't matter. The days that they change direction, that's more interesting to me. But whatever, we've got Mercury in Cancer, trine Pluto, or excuse me, trine Neptune in Pisces. And so we're both in water signs. Okay, cute, lovely. Trine, right? Trines, we know generally everybody's on the same page. We're all in agreement. We like what's happening. It feels right. Trines also can be places where we don't challenge the situation because everything feels like it's fine. Where a square creates friction, it is also pointing to a place that with work, we can make some improvements. Trines point to lack of friction. They point to everything being lovely and slippery and quite nice. And so we are not challenged to improve the situation in any way. If everything is fine, why mess with it? Oftentimes can be our attitudes with a trine. And so sometimes we can have a trine where it's like we just don't question it. And maybe some questioning might be helpful in that process. We're dealing with Mercury in Cancer and Neptune in Pisces, two water signs. And our water signs are all about our emotions, our intuition, our spiritual experiences, our under the surface experiences, our in the depths, behind closed doors, our private experiences, our intuitive, our emotional experiences. And those are illogical. They are important, but they are illogical, right? They are things that happen and they don't have to connect to reality in any way. And sometimes that's really powerful and important. And sometimes that is really powerful, but isn't necessarily applicable. Or, it's kind of like, are you thinking with your brain or are you thinking with your heart kind of a moment when we're dealing with water sign stuff. And Mercury in Cancer is definitely thinking with their heart. They are processing situations, believing that they're working from an intellectual standpoint, but Mercury in Cancer is very much intellectually processing things from an emotional place. And so it can be really easy to confuse our thoughts with our emotions. Those are two different things. And it can be very easy to assume that our emotional information is the same as our intellectual information, and it is not. I'm not saying that one is more important than the other. I'm saying that they are different, and it is important for us to understand the differences, right? Like XYZ may have actually physically happened in the world, and then here's how I feel about that, right? Those could be two very different things. So when Neptune gets involved with stuff, everything gets more confusing, everything gets more hazy, everything is more nebulous. It is more difficult to tell fact from fiction, to understand reality versus illusion. There's a lot of blurring of the lines. There's a lot of like blurring of boundaries and all of that stuff. And because it's a trine, all of that might feel very right and totally okay. So I know that was a very long-winded explanation of this transit, but I kind of wanted to get you situated in it, like settled into it, because I think that it sort of kicks us off for a very interesting series of transits, and kind of understanding how these things might play out, I think is based in understanding where we're starting. And it's here in Mercury, Cancer, trine, Neptune, Pisces. So things that I've got in my notes dealing with this trine: powerful emotional spaces, a lot of nostalgia, a lot of reflection. It could feel very romantic. This could be a day of some really powerful and important and maybe even necessary familial healing. And that might be your trip, right? Just privately and personally, that you're healing around some stuff that is family issues. There might actually be healing between family members. This might be ancestral stuff. Um, there could be a very romantic vibe about this work. Um, but and what else do I want to say that's positive about this? It could be a very creative day. It could be a very spiritual day, a fantastic day for doing spiritual study. I will say that. A beautiful day for hanging out in nature, a beautiful day for going out on the water or being in water in any kind of way. And it could feel very soothing, right? If none of that family stuff comes up for you, God is bless, it could just be a day where everything just feels okay. Like your brain and your emotions are getting along with each other. Hooray. Where could this be a little weird, though? Um, we might step into a place where our unconscious starts to spill over and we begin to overshare, or somebody in our vicinity is oversharing. And again, maybe that's great. Maybe that's really cool. Or maybe that is setting us up for some of the other stuff that's going to come up this week. You know what oversharing is for you versus just sharing. So that's a very relative per person kind of thing. But I know it's supposed to be a nice transit, and here I am trying to come with all the bad news and the heavy. But what I'm sort of saying here is if you can, go swimming on this day, have a beautiful day. Maybe don't gossip on this day. Maybe do what you can to think about what you're about to say before you say it. Take a breath, take a beat, take a moment. Am I ready to say this? Is this person ready to hear this? We might think that right now. How is it going to feel 24 hours from now that I've said this or that you said this? That thing. In every other way, though, creative, romantic, familial, nostalgic, beautiful. So if it's all of that stuff for you, awesome. Enjoy. Just note that kind of on the periphery, things might get a little confusing, a little hazy, a little oversharing moment, a little bit of like my insides are spilling out, right? And when we're spilling things, we're not necessarily in control of. It's not the same as dispensing, right? It's not the same as sharing. That's all. Just that. That's all. That's all that's happening on this day that I'm going to note. Okay. Because, wildly enough, per the 700 calendars that I follow, we have no holy days of note for Sunday, July 9th. What? What? Wild. So also enjoy that, a day to your own, a day that does not belong to the gods or the ancestors. My goodness. Yes. Apparently we still get a couple of those a year. Like, and there's one. So, so enjoy it while you have it. All right, let's move on to the rest of this week and all of the stuff that's going on. Okie dokie. My precious artichokies. That brings us to Monday, July 10th. So first off, let's discuss the astrology because there is a lot. Well, there's some. What do we have going on? We have Mars entering 0 degrees of Virgo, and we have Mercury entering 0 degrees of Leo. But before Mercury makes that move, we have Mercury in Cancer opposing Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 29 degrees. Again, oh no, the 29-degree thing. Blah. Okay. I went off about this last week. The astrologers last year and this year, are very, very excited about the 29th degree of stuff. And it's because Pluto is hanging out here so much so in this year. And a lot of quite spicy things are happening as Pluto is hanging out here. It will station direct at some point, continue to hang out in the 29th degree. It's going to go back to 27 degrees, I think, ultimately this year. But we'll cross back over this 29th degree and then head on to Aquarius. And then next year, it is going to station retrograde again, and it is going to come back to this 29th degree of Capricorn again. And then finally be done with it and move on. And it won't be here again for about another 250-ish years. So cool, but in the meantime, we have several tantrums to deal with. Um, TLDR on this whole 29th degree thing, it seems to be the opinion that when things are at the 29th degree of a sign, that everything is sort of ramped up. It's intensified, it's magnified, it's boosted, it's oomphed. And it has a crisis feeling about it, a critical feeling about it, like a, oh no, we got to get this right, or wow, this is really important kind of a thing. Generally speaking, most of the astrologers that I hear talk about this don't talk about it in a positive way. Um, I being a Sagittarius, I'm like, I'm sure there's a shiny side to the penny somewhere, but sometimes I'm wrong. So your mileage may vary. I certainly encourage you to not just be doom and gloom when it comes to the astrology, but just note that the going opinions out there is that this is hard. This is hard, it's intense, can be very frustrating. Okay. So everything in the sky that has moved past 29 degrees of Capricorn or 0 degrees of Aquarius has had to sort of like pay the toll to Pluto. And either it's literally crossing over those degrees, or it is squaring those degrees, or it's opposing those degrees, or even trining or sextiling those degrees. Everything has sort of had to pay the toll to Pluto at this like gate between Capricorn and Aquarius. And Mercury opposed Pluto is a tough transit. This is a tough transit. We have the intellect of Mercury versus the investigative, transformative, death, rebirth vibes of Pluto, right? Pretty casual. That sounds like a walk in the park. So looking at my notes, I have things written down like feeling deeply focused on our pain and our healing, getting to the bottom of our pain. When it comes to Pluto stuff, we can utilize words like obsessive or fixation, because Pluto is like, I'm driven to find the core of this thing, or the bottom of this thing, or the heart of the thing. And everything else sort of takes a back seat to Pluto's obsession about the thing. And so Pluto plus Mercury can feel like I can't stop thinking about this. My mind continually turns back to this thing, or into this thing, or towards this thing. In a very simple way. When we're having intense Mercury Pluto transits, it can be like, I can't get this song out of my head. But you know how that feels, right? Like you get a song stuck in your head and it can be there for days or weeks. And it's like, why? Where is this coming from? And it just is popping up, and it's popping up over and over and over again for no good reason. Like nothing is instigating it. It's just like, hi, I'm here again. Here's that lyric you can't stop thinking about. And so these transits can feel like that. It can feel intrusive. And it can ramp up things like paranoia. It can ramp up stuff like, where yesterday, this very lovely transit between Mercury and Neptune is like, oh, some things are sort of spilling over from the unconscious and I'm sharing. Wow. Mercury plus Pluto can feel like things are erupting from the unconscious. It's like I'm blurting out this thing that's been under pressure for this crazy amount of time. And oh my God, I can't not say this. Blah. Right. So so we've gone from like, oh, I'm sharing. Oh, maybe I'm oversharing and I can't stop. And it's just pouring out of me now, and it's gushing and now it's erupting out of me. Right. Wild vibes, wild vibes. And then, as I said, on the same day, we have Mars switching signs into Virgo and Mercury switching signs into Leo just a few hours later. And Mars in Virgo doesn't hate it, doesn't love it. It's an interesting combination of stuff. Mars is very impatient. So that's a place where it is not like Virgo. Virgo has all day to organize the sock drawer. But Mars is very driven, and Mars is like, no, I want to get on it. Let's make stuff happen. And Virgo is like, oh, cool. Yeah, me too. I want to make stuff happen. I want to get the work done. So, Mars and Virgo, not on the same page in some ways, definitely on the same page in other ways. And then we have Mercury in Leo, and Mercury and Leo are fine with each other. Mercury wants to talk about it, wants to communicate, wants to discuss, wants to network. Leo loves to make the scene, loves to be seen with people, loves to hang out with people and chat and confer and all of that. So there's a lot of camaraderie there with Mercury vibes and Leo vibes. It's fine. But like I said, in the midst of that, we have this very funky moment with Mercury opposing Pluto and bringing up some stuff that might be a little funky, a little sticky, a little weird, and like building off of the energy from the day before. What else can come up with Mars Virgo? It might mellow out a little bit of the vibes of Venus also traveling through Leo, who has been here for a minute. Remember, Venus is going to be stationing retrograde here in the sign of Leo. So Mars might help with some of those energies, oddly enough. Might take some of the attention off of some of that stuff. And might be like, no, I'm more down to like get into the details of these things. I shouldn't say that they are also there. Mars is leaving Leo. Venus has entered Leo. And so it might turn the heat down a little bit. And Mars is like, I'm distracted. I'm organizing the sock drawer. And Venus is like, cool, I'll take it from here. Thank you. Conversely, Mercury entering Leo, where Venus is like, I want to talk about it. Let's chat about it. Let's communicate. Let's network. Let's socialize. Let's do the thing. And also, Mercury Leo can bring up issues around self-esteem, getting your message out, branding. And if we're all on the same page with that, if that's feeling good, then it's doing all of that stuff with extra flair, like more flair than we normally would. Again, Venus is here, about to station retrograde, so we're going to have a talk about this, and it's going to be a 4-month-long talk. So tuck in, like the totality of Venus's transit through Leo. It's a few months long, right? So tuck in. But you can see where like the stuff is starting to get a little weird, right? Starting to get a little funkadelic. Okay. So like, how do I want to talk about this? Here's what I'm going to say, and I'm going to come back to this, I think, again, and towards the end of or whatever, later in the podcast. Let me say this. From July 9th through July 12th, we have this series of transits where collectively what the effects might look like is that things develop rapidly and erratically. It may be difficult to assess external events, like stuff happening in the world or stuff happening around you. It might be difficult to assess your personal capabilities to deal with that stuff. It's not that you can or that you can't. It might just be difficult to figure out if you can or if you can't. Cumulatively, all of these transits, and we have a few more days of transits to talk about here, might feel like you're getting contradictory information internally and externally, mixed messages internally and externally. And anything that you suddenly have to take a part of, or suddenly have to undertake, or suddenly have to get involved in might be a little anxiety inducing. And I think that a sentence like that is kind of true no matter what, but like under these circumstances in particular, like we're starting this whole thing off with this big influence from Neptune is sort of how I'm thinking about it, who makes things nebulous, hazy, confusing, murky. Neptune to me always feels like that moment when you can't feel the bottom of the pool and you're like, how far does this go? How far am I from the surface? What's happening right now? I feel disoriented. It's that thing. And so, for some of us, when that feeling kicks in, some of our survival mechanisms kick in, and maybe they shouldn't be, right? Like everything's fine. We're 2 inches away from the surface of the water, but we don't know. And so we start to act a little weird. But all of this is going to kind of culminate in a transit that we're having on the 12th. Okay. So there's like a little sampler of what is going on with the astrology of this week. And I will get more into the details of that in just a second. Or do I want to do that now? See, it's shocking to me that I made it to 100 episodes. Like how? No. We're going to talk about the holy days because there is some really interesting stuff happening with the holy days. So we'll come back to the astrology in just a second. Okay. Monday, July 10th, holy days. Kicking off with the heliacal risings of two fixed stars, Propus and Wasat. And Propus is found in the constellation of Gemini. It is in and it means close. It's basically like in the middle of the constellation of Gemini. And it literally relates to the closeness of these two characters. To me, again, this sort of is making me think about the astrology of the day before with Mercury and Neptune, of like the blurring of boundaries and the blurring of lines and stuff like that. It symbolizes companionship. It symbolizes togetherness. It symbolizes closeness, all of that good stuff. And it's sort of like the closeness of these two beings that we think of as um uh as the constellation of Gemini, the twins of constellation Gemini. And yet it might not be super positive. I'm going to read the last paragraph from the Astrology King website, where I get a lot of my fixed star information. Not all of it, but a lot of it. He says this: so Propus, with the quote unquote help of nearby Wasat, who we're just about to talk about, may be yet another factor in the negative quote unquote nervous breakdown qualities which we note to occur sometimes with Castor, who we are also hanging out with. Apart from drawing attention, that's another fixed star. Apart from drawing attention to the patient to the ancient historic reasons for our unconscious states of fear, for which refer again to Castor, a good therapy for sufferers from Propus in particular is to encourage them to employ their associative thinking capacities deliberately and usefully so that they might become skilled in the control of them. A good astrologer is preferable to a sick paranoiac anytime. So here is another thing happening in the sky that might be encouraging a type of paranoia, a type of pessimism, a type of negative nervous breakdown, anxiety kind of a thing, right? Okay, wow. Yikes. We're getting a lot of it this week. Okay. So now let me flip over to the other fixed star that we just mentioned, called Wasat. The traditional name Wasat comes from the Arabic al-Wasat, which means the middle. And interestingly enough, Pluto was discovered conjunct Wasat on 18 February 1930. So what? Like we are sort of, it's like we're running over the same ground and the same vibes and the same energy over and over and over again in a way this week. Very weird, very interesting, cool, but weird. Cool, but weird. But this isn't even like the thing that I wanted to mention about Wasat. This is the fixed star Wasat is of the nature of Saturn. This is a thing in fixed star astrology, is that the stars are ascribed with characteristics derived from the 7 ancient planets of astrology. This is very normal. So a lot of people will say that a fixed star has the energy of this planet or this planet plus that planet. So that's normal. So whatever it is that you connect with Saturn, ancient astrologers were connecting to this fixed star as well. But what I think is very important here is that it is connected with chemicals and poisons and gas. And something that I will often say about Pluto is that it is poison and medicine that come from the same root. Chiron also represents an energy that is similar to the idea of poison and medicine coming from the same root. So that's a lot of the stuff, I think, that's sort of the undercurrent of the energy of what we're working with this week. I think that certainly could be said about difficult family matters, that the poison and the medicine often comes from the same root. Heavy stuff, right? It's important, but it's tough. Um, Wasat joins the twins in the middle. That's why it means middle. So very much like um, Propus, it represents the connectivity between these two beings. Um, and do with that what you will. So that's what's up with these two fixed stars. Now, what else is happening for us on Monday, July 10th? From our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the Eye of Ra enters the horizon. Now, the Eye of Ra is from Wikipedia, a being in ancient Egyptian mythology that functions as a feminine counterpart to the sun god Ra and a violent force that subdues his energy. And I would say that I would say that the version of the Eye of Ra that I have been the most familiar with is the goddess Sekhmet, who is the lion-headed goddess in Egypt, who is a version of the sun, and she can be very violent. She's all about justice and protection and stuff like that, but she also can be very intense with her energy. But as I was reading through about this deity, I found this. Now, the Egyptians associated many gods who took felid form with the sun, and many lionesses deities like Sekhmet, Menhit, and Tefnut were equated with the Eye of Ra. Bastet was depicted as both a domestic cat and a lioness. And with these two forms, she could represent both the peaceful and the violent aspects of the eye. Yet another goddess of the solar eye was Mut, the consort of the god Amun, who was associated with Ra, etc., etc. Right? But also, cobra goddesses are often represented as the Eye of Ra. And one of them was Wadjet, which to me, my American mind sounds a whole lot like Wasat, right? Like, wait a minute, what? Now, I am making that connection. I am not saying that I am correct. I'm just saying that I think it's an interesting coincidence that these two things are happening at the same time and the words are so similar. But that doesn't mean they're the same thing. They can be different things and still talking about the same thing. So let me just be clear. But cobras, right? Certainly known for their poisons. Certainly known for their poisons. And we make medicines from venom. So what? Okay. But Wadjet is a tutelary deity of Lower Egypt, closely associated with royal crowns and the protection of the king. Other cobra goddesses associated with the eye include the fertility deity Renunetet, who we talk about, the magician goddess Weret Haku, and Meret Seger, the divine protector of the burial grounds, etc., etc. So feline, serpent forms, but other goddesses are connected to the Eye of Ra as well. Hathor is connected, who is a cow, Nekhbet, who is a vulture, etc., etc. So it's not just, but I thought that was very interesting. Sothis also is connected to this deity, who we talked about a lot last week. Sothis being another name for the the fixed star series, etc., etc. Okay, so what else is happening on this day? One other thing from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Dies Natalis of the Temple of Concordia. And Concordia is a goddess who embodies agreement in marriage and society. Her Greek equivalent was usually regarded as Harmonia. And she was often associated with peace or pax. And to me, this makes me think about the closeness between people, right? The closeness that is required for harmony. That harmony may literally be, I'm in a city living shoulder to shoulder with people, and I may or may not get along with them, but I need to harmonize with them. I need to have a closeness with them. Maybe I'm mashing all of this stuff together. I don't know, but it stands out to me. I really feel like these are all today, this week anyways, I really feel like these are all pieces of a puzzle that I'm still figuring out what the picture is. But that's what we've got for Monday, July 10th. I know, right? It's already like, what's going on with this week? What are we doing? This is a lot, guys. What's happening? Remember, our Litha energy is all about power, responsibility, transformation, fertility, all of that good stuff. Okay, so this brings us to Tuesday, July 11th. And what do we have going on here? Some more interesting astrology. We have Mercury, who has just entered Leo, immediately squaring the North Node in Taurus at 1 degree and squaring the South Node in Scorpio at 1 degree. Oh, good. So now let's bring in elements of fate and destiny and desire into this conversation, right? Our North Node represents stuff that we are driving towards. It's opportunities dangled in front of us by the universe. And sometimes, and the big conversation for me is, why do I want that thing? Why do I think that thing is meant for me? And it's a square. So this might be, think about what's already happened for us in the last 2 days with potentially oversharing, potentially family stuff coming up, potentially being sort of like fixated on getting to the root of a thing or finding the depth of the secret, the family secret that has suddenly come out. I got to know the whole story, all of that stuff. And now Mercury is squaring the North Node, which to me feels very much like potent conversations, potent pieces of information coming in and potentially thwarting us or making us feel like we are being thwarted from forces that are larger than us, bigger than us. And or suddenly we have received this very difficult piece of information that is changing our fate, changing our path, changing the course of the work that we thought we were doing. It could manifest in any of those ways, I think. Also on this day, we have Mars, who has just entered Virgo, trining the North Node in Taurus at 1 degree and sextiling the South Node in Scorpio at 1 degree. And so Mars is on the same page with whatever is going on with the North Node and the South Node for us. And so Mars might be lending this attitude of, it's perfectly fine for me to be impatient about this. It's perfectly fine for me to be driven or selfish or short-sighted or passionate, or argumentative, right? Because those are all the things that Mars wants to do. It wants to argue about it. It's excited. It's driven. It wants to be there yesterday. It wants what it wants, right? And so in between these two pieces, I feel like this could be a day that feels even more frustrating of like, I want what I want, and yet I'm getting this information, or I'm having this conversation in my brain, or I'm receiving information from the outside that is squaring me, that's creating some kind of friction, some kind of problem that I have to adjust for, some gap in the plan, something. It's spicy stuff. It's very spicy stuff for us, I think. Okay, so now let's take a look at the holy days of July 11th. We start off with running from July 11th through July 18th, non-binary awareness week. This is a global holiday or global day of reckoning or recognition. I like that I wanted to say reckoning there. It's like, this is a global day of reckoning for non-binary individuals. Which honestly, it's fine. Non-binary awareness week happens here on July 14th because it is exactly midway between International Men's Day and International Women's Day, which we love. There are 23 different US states plus Washington, D.C. that allow residents to mark their gender as X. We have, plenty of countries around the world that have sort of stopped putting gender on passports, et cetera, et cetera. So, this is a growing awareness and a growing understanding that's happening around the world. Non-binary folks, are folks who do not identify with the traditional gender binary, aka men or women. They are both, neither, something else, i.e., those who do not exclusively identify as a man or a woman, or may identify as both, or who may identify outside of these categories altogether. Goblin, certainly appropriate here. But this is an International Day of Awareness and Celebration of those members of our community. Okay, what else is happening on this day from our Mongolian friends and ancestors? We have Nadam. And Nadam is running from July 11th to July 13th. This is a traditional 3-day festival that happens in Mongolia. It's celebrated as a public holiday. It's a UNESCO holiday because it has gone so far back into history. We don't know how long people have been doing this, but clearly thousands of years. And it is ultimately a midsummer celebration, very similar to the other midsummer celebrations that we see all over the Northern Hemisphere at this time of year. Interesting to me is that there is archery and horse racing. That is like a big deal during this. And horse racing and riding horses and dancing on horses is something that we see come up multiple times with our magical symbolism, astro symbolism, and some of our other ancient holidays and modern holidays. So the whole horse thing is definitely a thing at this time of year. Okay. Also on this day, from our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the feast of Salacia and Neptunalia. Now, I talked about these a little bit last week. These are part of the festival complex that is kicked off by Lucaria. And so this is the first portion of those festivals that I mentioned last week. This is Salacia is a sea nymph, and Neptunalia, of course, dedicated to the god Neptune. And even when Romans were doing this, they didn't exactly know what they were doing. I love that about a lot of our ancient Roman holidays, that the Romans were just copying even older traditions and celebrations, and they were like, we don't know why we're doing this, but we know we have to, so just do it. But it was a big day for like leaving offerings for Neptune and things along those lines. um uh, Respecting the ceremonies of this festival, nobody knows, except that people used to build huts of branches and foliage and hang out in them. That's literally all we know about it. But some folks think that this has something to do with blessing waters and blessing waterways, or giving offerings to Neptune in hopes of continuing to irrigate their crops that they are growing through this highest part of summer. And or if they were super close to the equator, and not growing crops at this time of year, preparing the land for crops that we're going to be growing later. Remember, for our ancient Egyptians, we are just about at the time of the Nile rising and cresting and flooding the banks and ultimately flooding the Nile Delta. And so it maybe is in conjunction with that. I'm just speculating here. I don't know that for sure. But yeah, interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Also on this day from our Catholic friends and ancestors, not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we have the feast of Saint Benedict. Saint Benedict, kind of a big deal in Catholicism. The rules of Saint Benedict, sort of a big deal if you're like a monk or whatever, if you're into that stuff. Saint Benedict, religious reformer who lived in Italy in the 400s or 500s, known as the father of Western monasticism. So you can blame him for that, but monastic stuff is actually kind of cool in some ways. Patron saint of Europe, so kind of influential. But basically, he came up with a guidebook for integrating prayer, manual labor, religious study into a well-rounded daily routine, which became the basis of a lot of Christian practices, literally for the last 1500 years. So kind of a big deal. But why specifically do I want to bring him up? Because one of the things that this homeboy is known for is being depicted with a broken cup and a serpent representing poison. Fucking what? Excuse me? I'm sorry, hello? Hello? As we like to say here on the podcast, say it with me. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but boy, wow, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Overseas spelunkers as well. So deep dives into the darks and into the depths of things and stuff. I mean, come on sometimes, right? Like, hello? You're really up in my face with you're like up in my face. Okay, and the last thing I want to mention for Tuesday, July 11th is from our Hindu friends and ancestors. We have Kara Puja. This is a festival dedicated to um, basically Vastu Devata, who is a guardian deity. It's a multi-day festival. There's offerings, sacrifices, public displays of dopeness. Um, People don't wear shoes, they don't light fires, all of this cool stuff. Interesting holiday. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're interested, but we don't have enough time to cover it here. Okay. That is going to move us on to Wednesday, July 12th. Where do we have more interesting astrology? You know that we do. Okay. So, what's going on here? We have the sun in Cancer square Chiron in Aries at 19 degrees. Okay. And I'm going to go back and read my notes that I mentioned earlier in the podcast. I'm going to repeat myself thusly. Now through 712, look at all the transits. So we're talking about the Mercury-Neptune situation on the 9th. Then we're talking about Mercury-Pluto on the 10th. Then we're talking about Mercury North Node and Mars North Node on the 11th. And now we're talking about Saturn square Chiron. Things may develop rapidly and erratically. It might be difficult to assess our external events. It might be difficult to assess our own capabilities in the midst of whatever it is that's going on. We might be getting contradictory information, mixed messages that might be coming from us or coming to us, right? So be aware that we might be the source of confusion too, and not meaning to be. And that sudden projects that or situations that have to get dealt with out of the blue could be anxiety inducing. Culminating in this 712 transit, which is Sun square Chiron in Aries. Sun in Cancer square Chiron in Aries at 19 degrees. So, what are my notes here? Tough, painful identity stuff. And there certainly are some pretty interesting culture wars happening in America. I know that this stuff is going on in other places around the world where people are attacking our trans and non-binary siblings and community members, our lovers, our friends, our kids, our family members. And so this might be a day where we see some really funky attacks on identity. We might also see some bad actors pretending like their identities are being attacked because they are, white supremacists or they're bigots or they're Christian fascists. And they're like, oh, but this is my faith. Oh, but this is my culture. No, it isn't. Stop it. Mary, give it up. So it could be that we are experiencing it. It could be that our people are experiencing it. It could be things that we're witnessing in the world. Is there anything good that can come from this? Yes. It's just hard. Remember what we always say about a square. It is the universe pointing out what's going wrong or where there is friction so that we have an opportunity to produce some medicine, to ease the friction, to make some adjustments, corrections. What do we need to do to improve the situation? And that might just be moving out of the space of haters, right? It could be just that, like, oh, I don't want to be in this environment. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm missing out on this fun thing, but I'm giving myself peace of mind by moving over to this other place. But collectively, in the best of circumstances, and let's hope for that, right? Let's move towards that. Collectively, in the best of circumstances, these 4 days of transits offer opportunities for really potent conversations to happen for information, memories, data, whatever, emotions to come up from the unconscious to bubble up to the surface, be revealed, be discussed, be talked about, be known, be seen, the pain that comes along with all of that, and ultimately healing. Because as much as Chiron is about our sacred wound and where that came from and what it means, ultimately the reason why Chiron is bringing that work up for us, or we could also say how Chiron is representing this in our process, is that Chiron wants to heal. Now, here's something difficult with Chiron. I know you're like, what else? What else is hard about this? Like, there's more? Come on. That it's very, very rare that we will be healing our own wounds when it comes to Chiron stuff. Oftentimes, Chiron is showing us where we could heal other people, and brace yourself, where other people could be healing us. I know. But this could be a series of 4 or 5 days of astro transits that are tough, painful, a bummer, not fun, feels like poison, but is actually revealing here is the wound. And now that we see it clearly, let's apply some medicine. Let's apply some healing. And we might be going through that process. Someone in our community, our loved one, our family member, our friend might be going through the process. Might be both of us. Might be, right? It could be a thing where it's like all of us are kind of fucked up. Could be that, right? And so this could represent a place where collectively we're like, wow, we are all fucked up a little bit here. We are all wounded. Here's my medicine that I have to share. Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing your medicine. And today we are all a little more healed from that too. It's just in normal fashion for 2023, not exactly fun to get to that place. It's a lot of squares that are getting us to this place. It's a lot of squares, right? So, so there's that. But we can't fix things. We can't heal things if we can't admit that there is a wound. So the first part of a lot of this work for us is to admit to ourselves, this hurts. This is a wound. This is painful. I never healed from that thing that happened. Turns out, holy crap. I should probably do something about that. Let me let someone else do something about that on my behalf. That thing. Okay. What are our holy days for July 12th? We have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Castor. And Castor is also found in the constellation of Gemini. It represents the mortal twin, famous for his skill in taming and riding and managing horses. Interesting. Occasionally, Castor is called Apollo. And symbolically, Castor represents a ruler yet to come. And that phrase really makes me think about the heart of our Litha work, the place where we are stepping into our responsibility. We are stepping into our leadership roles. We are not leaders yet. We are becoming leaders. We are doing the work. We're doing the homework. We're doing the behind the scenes adjustments that are required for us to be able to wear the crown, to be able to hold the scepter, to be able to lead the group, and bear the weight, bear the responsibility, bear the power, bear the problems, all that stuff. That. Okay. There's a lot more I could say about Castor. There's a lot of really cool information and myth connected to Castor and Pollux, the two gods of Sparta, the twins, the sons of Leda, queen of Sparta, Roman equivalents, Apollo and Hercules, etc., etc. But I think enough to say skilled horsemen, twins, competitors, and close, right? Tied at the waist. The other thing that this makes me think of, and this is where I'm like, okay, I've studied magic for too long, but this is the other thing it makes me think about. Think with me to the Smith Waite Tarot deck, the Magician card. The Magician card is connected to the planet Mercury. Mercury is the ruling planet of Gemini. And Mercury, the Magician in the Magician card is wearing an Ouroboros, or a serpent biting its own tail, as a belt around their middle, around their waist. The Chariot card, which is connected to the sign of Cancer, also depicts a person wearing a belt that is tilted at the same angle as the zodiacal plane. But specifically that Mercury connection with the serpent, and that connection to Gemini, and these stars, being about the middle, the waist, closeness, tied together at the hip, kind of a vibe. And all of our information about serpents and poison that has already come up here. Again, maybe I'm just smashing all this stuff together, but it's doing a cool little dance in my brain. Okay. That's all I have to say about that fixed star. Go read up on the myths of Castor and Pollux. I do have a big giant piece on my website about Gemini and other sacred twins, in the Beltane category and in the Litha category. It's like if you go to the Litha page on my website, it's listed in the menu at the top, and scroll all the way down to the bottom. There's a big old piece about divine twins around the planet and all of the cool magics and myth that are connected with them, if you want to read up more on that stuff. Okay. What else is happening here? July 12th, we have, running from July 12th through August 23rd, the Delta Aquarids meteor showers. Very, very briefly, these are pretty cool meteor showers. There's another meteor shower that happens basically at the same time that I think is the Capricornids. I might be wrong about that. Very few meteors from that shower, but when they happen, they're huge fireballs. So that's kind of cool. The Delta Aquariids, lot more, not so flashy. Our next full moon is August 1st, which is also relatively near the peak of this meteor shower. So this is not the best year for witnessing this meteor shower, but basically any time between now and August 23rd, if you can get out of the city and get to a place where there's some nice dark skies, you will have an opportunity. Obviously, just look up a Delta Aquariid meteor shower in your area, and sites like earthsky.org and other places will show you what angle, like what direction to expect the meteors to be coming from, and what time of night is the moon setting. So when is going to be your best opportunity to see those. Fantastic reason to go out and hang out outside all night. It's the summer. That's what we're supposed to be doing anyways. Okay. Last but not least, for holy days for Wednesday, July 12th, we have from our Hopi friends and ancestors, the Neman Kachina dances. And these are the Kachina dances where they take place just after summer solstice. And this is the going home of the Katsinas, or the Kachinas. This is a ceremony to say goodbye to the winter and spring Kachina. During this beautiful last ceremony of the Katsina season, the Katsinam bring the first harvest of the season to the villagers, as well as presents for the kids. This is a beautiful time for celebration, family get-togethers, lots of eating and drinking and having a good time, but also saying thank you and goodbye to these entities that have seen them through winter and spring. Now that we are in summer, it's sort of like the casinos are like, you're cool, you're protected, you're going to be fine, we'll be back in a few months. And they go back up to the spirit world in the San Francisco peaks, that mountain range outside of San Francisco, for the rest of the year. There's music. The first green corn stalks of the harvest are, celebrated during this, et cetera, et cetera. Very cool stuff. Very, very cool stuff. Again, this is another festival that I highly recommend reading more about if you live here in North America, especially if you're here on the West Coast, and learning more about this beautiful celebration and group of people. Okay. That brings us to July 13th, which is a Thursday, wherein we have at 12:06 p.m. Pacific Standard Time our balsamic moon in Gemini at 6 degrees. This moon is squaring Saturn retrograde at 6 degrees in Pisces and sextiling Mercury at 5 degrees of Leo. So, as if we haven't had enough from Mercury this week, here's a little bit more. This is in our lunar week, our last conversation with Mercury, our last conversation with Saturn. Lovely. Thank you. Goodbye. So, first off, what are we doing with a balsamic moon? Our balsamic moon is the last phase of the lunar cycle before we have our new moon. So officially, this is the post-funk. We are in the shutting it down phase of this current lunar cycle. We've done it all. I love that this word is used to describe this, balsamic, because it always makes me think of vinegar. And what it makes me think of is this is the time where I am distilling everything that I can distill from this last lunar process, this last lunar cycle. Let me think about this last month of stuff that's gone down and what am I going to take away from it? What needs to be filtered out, but ultimately, what can I concentrate down into a really potent drop of information, useful wisdom, guidance? What's my takeaway here? That's really kind of the gig for me with the balsamic moon. What's the takeaway? What did we learn? What did we earn? And what comes next? Because the balsamic moon also has a vibe about it for many of us many times, not everybody every time, but the balsamic moon can really pull towards the future or feel like it's being pulled by the future. It's like, I'm ready to be done with this thing. Let's just get on to the next. When's the new moon? Let's go. And yet we want to take some time to process, consider, ponder, mull, think about, distill, right? Let me just take a moment, look back at my journal entries from the last month, back at my texts to friends in the last month. Let me think about my social media usage in the last month. Let me think about the work I've done, how it's been in my house, like how's my health been, like all the stuff. Let me just think about what's up for this last month. What's my takeaway? That thing. That's really what we're doing with a balsamic moon. And the balsamic moon in Gemini is very much about data. It's very much about what has my brain been doing? What did I learn? What did I teach? What information was exchanged? How did all of that play out? And in particular, there can be a real deep emphasis on learning things on the balsamic moon when it's in Gemini and honoring our teachers, going back and saying thank you and literally paying our teachers, figuratively or literally with hard dollars. And saying thank you for teaching, thank you for being a community member that's dispensing information. If those are people that you are actually being guided by and learning from, and they are actually helping you. This is a great moon for that. It's interesting because just last week we had Guru Purnima, which is a yearly festival where Hindus do the same thing. They go to their gurus and say, thank you for teaching, thanks for guidance, thanks for all that stuff. So it really is about distilling down, what have I learned? What are my data centers? Where am I acquiring information from? What information am I passing on? Have I been gossiping like crazy for this last month? How's that working out for me? How do I feel about that? Have I been really, really active on social media? Has maybe a new social media platform dropped? How do I feel about that? Have you guys seen the chart of Threads, by the way? It's bad. Like, it's gnarly, gnarly business. The South Node in Scorpio conjunct the Ascendant, Pluto on the IC. Get out of here. Squaring the Scorpio Ascendant. I don't think so. If that isn't data mining, I don't know what is. Like, it's got placements in the 8th house, which is like its whole success is based on other people's information. Like, no, thank you. I know. Zuck already has all my damn information, but I don't want to give him any more. So today, I'm not excited about that platform. My tone may change in the future. I'm if nothing, if not fickle. But today, I'm not excited about it. That's my side note to that. But back to this moon and back to this astrology, square Saturn. Right? So there might be some heaviness here. There might be like, am I being judged by the people who teach me? Am I being judged by, am I too restricted in my information places? Are things feeling old and stodgy here? Does something need to be, something calcified that needs to be broken up? Am I too trapped by old ways of thinking? Sextile Mercury, I want to talk about it. I want to think about it. I do want to bring in data. I do want flair to my conversation pieces, all of that stuff. But ultimately, when we hit the balsamic phase in any lunar cycle, my baseline level of encouragement is relax, take it easy, chill out, calm down. Especially in those last 24 to 48 hours before the new moon. I know we all live in the real world. We live in the West. We live in the material world. So we've got jobs, we've got kids, we got dogs that got to get walked, we've got dishes that got to get washed, I guess. All of that. I know. But in whatever way, in those last 24, 48, 72 hours before the new moon, anywhere during that time where you can just shut it down for a little while and do nothing, that's the way to go. That's the winning process right there. And just chill and just be still. We're not undoing, we're not doing, we're just in the void. We're just drifting in the void. Take a nice long bath, sleep a little extra, take a nap, do some meditation. I really encourage no magic for the most part. Some magic is okay. And I mean, hey, again, you got free will. You do what you need to do and what feels appropriate for you. But I encourage less versus more. Okay. When we are experiencing our balsamic moon in Gemini, our waning balsamic moon in Gemini, for our lunar body, we are resting, relaxing, supporting, nourishing, or otherwise restoring the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, arms, hands, and armpits. And for our plant body work, we are pulling weeds, cutting trees for firewood and lumber. We're doing plowing, cultivating. We're pruning trees and vines. We're doing pest and disease control. We are harvesting below ground crops for eating, drying, or storing. We're fertilizing, and we are planting roots, trees, perennials, and biennials. And again, the chart for this moon is in the notes for everybody on Patreon, Mercury level and higher. Okay. That's it for the astrology for this day. So, moving on to the holy days for this day, we have running from July 13th to 15th, the Feast of the Moon from our modern pagan Wheel of the Year calendars. And why I think that this is placed here, because in a sense, there's no historical precedent for this. And in a sense, there's totally historical precedents for this. The 13th through 15th days of the moon month are the full moon. And so technically, we would be talking about the full moon in Cancer season. Now, we just had that last week. These dates that we get from Wheel of the Year, modern Wheel of the Year calendars from around the internet and from various books that have been published in the last 30-ish years or so, a lot of our witches were just picking approximate days that energetically made sense. And maybe there's sort of some historical precedent for some of this, but who could possibly figure out the accurate days? Well, now we know how, or we're getting better at sort of figuring that out. So perfectly fine to do a feast dedicated to the moon during this time. Perfectly fine. Who's the moon? Girl. Don't get me started. From our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the feast or the holiday of Furinalia. And Furinalia was an annual festival held to celebrate the sacred rites of the goddess Furina or Furina. It was noted that this festival was a public holiday, so everybody got work off and got to go play. the festival and the goddess had become obscure even to the Romans. So again, this is another one of those festivals that the Romans were like, we have to do this, but we don't know why. We don't know what we're supposed to be doing. And she had a sacred grove, and that's pretty much all we know, other than perhaps it had something to do with drought, probably connected to Neptunalia. This is one of those holidays that is in that festival complex again that I talked about last week, where we have these multiple festivals that are dedicated to like nature in its raw form, and then as we move into the later portion of this festival complex, it's nature in its adapted form, where it's been adapted by humans. Okay, and then also on this day, from our friends and ancestors in Spain and France, Viva la France! We are absolutely with you in the streets, my French friends. Give them hell. Um, the tribute of the three cows. And this is thought to be possibly the oldest still honored treaty on Earth that anybody knows about anyways. And it's been practiced every year, literally every year since 1375. There was a pause during World War II, and there was a pause during COVID, and otherwise it has never stopped. And it's literally that one group of people um, brings three cows, one town, Roncal brings three cows, or excuse me, the people of Beratus hand over three cows to the people of Roncal. It is a peace tribute. I read in one source that it's no longer cows, it's literally cash because of the mad cow disease situations that have happened in Europe over the years, which is kind of a bummer. But generally speaking, yeah, cows, cute. But also peace, right? We could use a little bit of that here on planet Earth. Some peace, guys. How about? Okay. Moving on to Friday, July 14th. But before that, how about an ad? Okay. If you love this podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you a bajillion billion times. See, the sirens are going off even as I say it. Thank you so much to my patrons. You guys don't even know. You don't even know. Thank you so much. You can sub for as little as $1 if you just think this podcast is dope and you want to support it. I don't run ads on the podcast, partly because I don't want to, and partly because I won't get paid even if I do. So screw them, man. You can sub, as I said, for as little as $1 or $5, even if you want to just support the podcast. And this is plenty of information. But if you want even more information, extra podcasts, extra videos, extra information about the Wheel of the Year, magical practices, tarot, etc., subbing at the higher levels, you get all kinds of cool free stuff. And at the even higher levels, you get free readings every month with me to be able to integrate all of this information into your personal life based on what's going on in your natal chart and all of that other good stuff. Join and change your life forever. Or, whatever. Thanks so much for the support. If you can't support financially, I completely understand because life sucks on Earth right now. It's too expensive for everything. Tell a friend, share it on social media, give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling especially hedonistic, you can leave a rating or a review. All right, that's the end of the ad. Let's get back to the podcast. July 14th. Let's start with the astrology of the day. We have Sun in Cancer, sextile Uranus and Taurus at 22 degrees. Fucking finally. Okay, look. That was a lot for the astrology earlier this week. We really went ham on that, and also it probably went ham on us. And now we have what is potentially a very lovely transit that I think could also be very helpful to whatever maybe has gone down earlier in the week. This brings back some fabulousness. It changes up the vibes. It adds some novelty. It adds some newness, some zhuzh, some joy. It just changes stuff up. So either it's like, okay, wow, that was really heavy and kind of a bummer. I need something different. Or wow, that was really heavy and I'm glad that we did it, but I need something different. So allow this vibe. It's on a Friday, it's in the evening. So hooray, right? Very best way to utilize this transit is go somewhere new, hang out with new people, try something different. You know, if there's a restaurant you've been thinking about going to, if there's a park you've been thinking about going to, if there's an event, like, oh, I heard about this band, but I don't know anything about them. Go see the show. Be safe. Be careful with how you conduct yourself. We still do have a panini out there, especially here in America. We're still not doing a good job of handling the panini. It's still burning our fingers. So conduct yourself in safe and healthy ways. Bring your hand sanitizer, all that stuff. But this is a great day for just like shaking it off and like moving into the weekend. That's really all I have to say about this astrology. Hooray! Hopefully it's nice. Or I swear to God, I will pull this whole car over. Okay. Holy days for July 4th, July 14th, Friday. From our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the festival that is referred to as Ma'at's Seat. And this is another piece of the gigantic Egyptian festival complex that is happening at this time of year. That is sort of the post beautiful reunion thing that we talked about in the last couple of weeks. If you want to learn more about that, you can listen to last week's podcast and the podcast before that. Really amazing complex of festivals from ancient Egypt. But also Ma'at was a representation of the physical world. And so this is sort of like a reckoning and an accounting of the physical world and for this goddess who is a representation of that before and as the Nile is beginning to crest and the heliacal rising of Sirius was happening, etc., etc. Again, this is for ancient Egyptians. These are not perfectly lining up with our dates today, but this is all happening approximately at this same time of year. So pretty cool stuff. From our U.S. Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of St. Kateri. We talk about St. Kateri, at the beginning of the year because she also has a holy day in Canada. This was an Indigenous woman who went into Catholicism totally voluntarily after she was kidnapped from her family and all of her family members were killed. She had chickenpox or measles really badly at one point in her life, and so she was scarred from that. Died very, very early and was canonized by the Catholic Church. I have a lot of opinions and feelings about this. I'm sure some of them are offensive to some people, but mostly I think of her as a being who was appropriated into Catholicism as a means for Catholicism to establish itself in yet another way with Canadians. Look, dude, even the natives do what we do. We must be cool, is kind of how it reads to me. And again, I understand that might be upsetting to some people, but I I think if we went back in time and we gave her all the options under the sun, she probably wouldn't go with colonizers. I don't know. What do I know about stuff? All right. Also on this day, globally, this is Non-Binary People's Day within the midst of Non-Binary Awareness Week. And also on this day from our New Zealand / Maori friends and ancestors, we have Matariki. From people in Aotearoa. I apologize if I am mispronouncing that. That is the indigenous name for the place that we call currently New Zealand. Matariki is a name for their New Year's. So here is yet another New Year's that's happening. We've also had several New Year's festivals gearing up or happening last week before, all of this right after summer solstice, on summer solstice and right after summer solstice. Lots of New Year's celebrations. But Matariki is also a star cluster, a star constellation in the sky, a cluster of stars in the sky. That, as far as I can tell, is what we call the Pleiades. Um, and so there is a lot of Maorian myth connected to this collection of stars. And I will be frank, I'm totally ignorant to it. I just found out about this. So I will be doing more research next year. Hopefully, I'll have a hell of a lot more to say about this. But what I think is really cool is that this is the Pleiades, but in Japan, this same collection of stars is called Subaru, which means to come together. Which, hello, we're already having that thing, right? Closeness and togetherness is already the vibe for this week. And in China, this cluster is called Mao, which is the hairy head of the white tiger. In India, it is known as Kritika. And the hairy head of the white tiger is something that is very interesting to me because white-headed beings are a really big deal around summer solstice in a lot of our Western traditions. So it's pretty cool to see that also in our Eastern traditions, white-headed beings are a big deal at this time of year. Trippy stuff. Very, very cool. Okay. The word is spelled Matariki if you would like to learn more about Matariki on your own. I highly recommend it, highly encourage it. Okay, that is scooching us on directly to Saturday, July 15th, where we have no astrology of note other than the moon is entering Cancer. And now we are officially, as of 7:22 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Saturday, July 15th, we are officially in the pre-funk for the new moon because our next new moon is going to be in Cancer. So the moon has now entered the sign where we're going to have our new moon. This is really, really, really balsamic at this point. Okay. Moving on to the holy days of Saturday, July 15th. We have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Pollux. And Pollux is the other sacred twin from Gemini. Pollux is often the twin that is thought of as the immortal twin. And when Castor was killed, Pollux was also almost killed, and Zeus jumped down and intervened, and then gave Pollux an ultimatum, basically, that was like, you can go to heaven and your homeboy can piss off, or you can share your immortality with Castor, and you both will spend half of your time in the underworld and half of your time in Olympus. And Pollux, being a real homie, was like, yeah, let's go with that one. And that is a part of where Mercury gets its reputation for being a being that, aka a psychopomp that can travel through all of the realms, can go to the underworld, can go to the realms of the living, and can go to the realms of the gods. So again, big old piece on my website about these two and lots of other sacred twins. Cool stuff out there in the world. Okay. Also on this day, from our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have the feast of Hero Eris. So the word or the name Hero Eris is actually Greek. And what it means, who it's referring to, is Great Horus or Horus the Elder. So this is a feast of Horus the Elder. And though we are saying that it is our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, this also might be our Greco-Egyptian friends and ancestors. Hero Eris is the sky god whose eyes are the sun and the moon. So this is bringing us back to the very first thing that we talked about in the podcast this week, the eyes of Ra, or the Eye of Ra. In various myths, he's also identified with the sun god. He also functions as the son of the sun god, or the offspring of the sun god. Hero Eris is also involved in the myth concerning the distant eye of the sun god, which he brings back from a far off land, which is, again, this idea of like the sun right at the beginning of the week. The Eye of Ra goes below the horizon. Next week, is it next week? Yeah. Next week, we will have the Eye of Ra returns. And so that is, we're in the midst of that and having this honoring of this deity who is a part of that thing. Um, okay, I think that's all I want to say about that. But there's more about that deity. There's more about all of these deities. Big surprise. Turns out there's a lot of shit to say about all these guys. That's why the podcasts are 7 hours long. Okay. Moving on to from our modern question mark pagan wheel of the year calendars, we have the Feast of Rowana. Rowana. Now, in my research around this, I found two different paths of information. One path was that this is simply another spelling of the goddess Rowena, and that's who we're actually talking about. And then in another pathway, I found folks saying, no, 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 this is in reflection to the Finnish the Finnish goddess Rauni, goddess of the rowan tree. So Rowana is actually correct. Rauni, Rana, the Finnish goddess. And I found a really cool website called Nifty Buckles that has a super cool piece, not very long, but interesting, on this goddess. And talks about Rowan the tree and kind of blends all of this stuff together. So, what are the interesting takeaways here? Rowan trees are sometimes discovered growing near stone circles and sacred sites like ley lines. They're connected to earth energy. They're also known as dragon lines. Um, Legend tells of a mystical race known as the Tuatha that imported the rowan tree from their sacred lands, which means the lands of promise. When they journeyed across Ireland, the rowan tree berries dropped seeds, and rowan trees began to sprout everywhere. But ultimately, this is a tree known to the Same, known to Estonians, and she oversaw healing, um, eliminated pain, and there was something here also about fertility, menstruation, love, human sexuality, pregnancy, childbirth, etc., etc., etc. But also there's something here about being a goddess to the underworld, um, and comforting deceased children and deceased babies, but also comforting all beings in the lands of the dead. And so there's a lot of really cool stuff here. Rowan is often considered a protective tree and used in protection amulets. Um, yeah, lots of interesting stuff, lots of cool stuff. Is this a purely modern thing, or is this connecting back to a more ancient practice? I'm not sure. I really couldn't tell you. It was difficult to find a consistent piece of information that I could kind of run through all the way. So your mileage may vary with that one. Um, just putting that out there. Okay. What else is happening on this day? We have from our Catholic friends and ancestors, Saint Vladimir Day. And Vladimir was a very interesting character. We're not going to talk about them a whole lot. Very, very big deal in Russia and like the Slavic world. Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Bulgarians, the Baltic tribes, etc., etc., etc. The dope thing that Vladimir did was that he like repaganized this whole stretch of Eastern Europe, and Central Europe, Eastern Europe was like, nope, we're putting up pagan statues everywhere. And then suddenly at some point in his life, he took a super hard right turn, and I mean right turn, and converted to Catholicism, came back to his main cities, and just started chopping down the pagan statues that he had erected, etc., etc. Um, who, why, how, who knows? Was he offered something? Did he truly have a conversion? Was he threatened? Was it just meant to be a show to like provide some protection for people for another stretch of time? Who knows? Um, but he did build a lot of pagan temples to Perun, to Strybog, to Dajbog, to Mokosh, etc. I mean, and on and on and on. Kors and Samargir, etc. Like he really went in on the worship for a minute, and then, like I said, he changed his mind at some point. All right, that's what we've got for Saturday, July 15th. That moves us on to Sunday, July 16th. We have no astrology of note this day. Goddess bless. So let's scooch directly on to the holy days of Sunday, July 16th. And first off, from our Vodun friends and ancestors, running from July 16th to the 22nd, we have the festival of Sudu. And Sudu is a pilgrimage and devotional practice that happens at this gigantic waterfall in the Dominican Republic, Haiti. Um, and it is ultimately, you go to the waterfall, you make a bunch of blessings, you may or make a bunch of offerings to the waterfall itself. And it is sort of thought of as like a personification or an embodiment of the Virgin Mary, or energy that we might think of as connected to the Virgin Mary. It is even referred to as Little Saint Anne, or the Miraculous Virgin from time to time. But people go, they make a bunch of offerings to the water, and then either they do ablutions themselves, or they have a babaloa or a priest or priestess with them to help them, and they do all these purification rituals, and then they literally just lay naked in the water, and like hundreds of people are there, everybody's into it, everybody's doing this, and it's a really big deal. And then you leave your clothes, the clothes that you came in, you leave there, and that's thought to be like you are leaving your old self behind and all your bad luck and any like funky energy you might be carrying with you, and you put on brand new clothes, and you kind of, it's like you pick up a new life basically. um and say thanks and all of that good stuff, hopefully imbued with the goddess's protection, luck for the future, etc. Okay. Also on this day, from our Yoruba friends and ancestors, we have the feast of Nanaburuku. And Nanaburuku, or Buluku, it's spelled both ways, is the female supreme being in West African tradition. Um, for the Fon people, Dahomey, Benin, Iwe people, Togo, she's all about it. She's like the grandma of the grandmas, basically. Like everything sort of starts with her, begins with her. She is the mother supreme creator. She gave birth to the moon, gave birth to the sun, gave birth to all of the universe. No big deal, right? Like just literally the baseline creator. There you go. Okay. Apparent by some sources, Nanaburuku or Buruku is also polygendered, both male, female, or all things contained within her. Maybe is another way to think of that. Yeah, lots of cool stuff to say about her. She's another really amazing character that I definitely recommend doing some study on. Okay. From our Turkish or Turkmenistan friends and ancestors, we have the very ancient festival of Gala Bayrami. Gala Bayrami is a festival that has been taking place for centuries, if not thousands of years, and it celebrates the annual wheat harvest. Yes, that is already kicking in. Yes. This is regarded as a massive holiday for the country's agricultural workers. It is a huge celebration of the harvest and all of the cultural elements that go along with the harvest, the songs, the clothes, the actions, the everything, all of the stuff. It's all built in. Bread, highly worshipped, all of that stuff. What I think is very interesting is sports competitions, particularly horse riding and showing off horses, is a big part of the Galabarami festivals. Interesting stuff. Yeah. Okay. Almost to the end here. From our Roman friends and ancestors, we have the Dies Natalis of the Temple of Fortuna Huisae Die. And that means literally the fortune of the day, the fortune of this day where we are right now. The celebration of various forms of fortune or fate, Fortuna, big deal to the Romans. Very, very big deal. From my notes, the fortune of this day, or today's fortune, was an aspect of the goddess Fortuna. She empowers each day. She thus embodies an important aspect of time as it figures in Roman religion. Every day of the year had a distinct and potent nature, which the public priests were responsible for knowing and aligning the community with by means of the religious calendar, kind of like I do in this podcast every week. And what it makes me think about is the Egyptians. And I'm sure the Egyptians weren't the only people, but they're one of the best documented civilizations that had something to say about every single day of the calendar. That there was a vibe to it and all that stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Romans were influenced by that practice or even just copied it. They might have also gotten the idea from plenty of other civilizations that were doing it too. Like I said, the Egyptians are just the best documented that I know of. And last but not least, Sunday, July 16th is International Drag Day. Bitch, you better go tip somebody right now. You better go see a drag show on this day. Tip your local drag queen. Take care of them. Drag king as well. It's a day for honoring the drag royalty in your community. And you might be thinking of those folks as just clowns, and that's fair. But also, drag community is one of the major elements in queer community. It is one of the most visible, and so it is often one of the most attacked elements of queer community. But our drag communities, our drag troops, our drag performers, our drag scenes are often safe places where people can experiment with their gender. They can explore the ideas of gender. They can explore their queerness in drag spaces. Drag performers often create these spaces, for themselves, but also for other community members to be able to come in and just find out what it means for them, what gayness or what queerness or what transness or what drag means for them as an individual. Drag is a place where things that we're not supposed to talk about can get talked about. Stuff we're not supposed to laugh at can be laughed at. Things that we're not supposed to mourn can be mourned openly. All of that stuff. So drag performances create safe space for people in a wide variety of ways. And, I could go on and on. I'm not going to. The power of drag. Go tip your local drag performer. Go celebrate a drag queen, a drag king, a drag sovereign of some sort. Go to your local drag night. It will do you good. If you have not gone in a long time, go. Okay. That's the astrology, and those are the holy days for this week. I know that was a lot, but we have made it to the end. Good job, everybody. Very, very quickly, I am going to go through our astrology for this week. Just make sure everybody's got their notes. Okay. Sunday, July 9th, we have our waning half moon at 17 degrees of Aries. We also have Mercury in Cancer, trine Neptune in Pisces at 27 degrees. July the 10th, Monday, we have Mars moving into Virgo. We have Mercury in Cancer opposing Pluto in Capricorn at 29 degrees, and then Mercury moving into Leo. The moon moves into Taurus on this day as well. I think I forgot to mention that. July the 11th, Mercury in Leo square the North Node in Taurus at 0 degrees. Mars in Virgo trine the North Node in Taurus at 0 degrees. Wednesday the 12th, we have the Sun in Cancer square Chiron in Aries at 19 degrees. Thursday, we have our balsamic moon in Gemini at 6 degrees. And Friday the 14th, we have the Sun in Cancer sextile Uranus in Taurus at 22 degrees. Saturday the 15th, the moon officially moves into Cancer, and we officially enter the pre-funk before the new moon. Okay. For our tarot card for this week, I was going to do Four of Cups last week. I think Four of Cups makes sense for this week. It's a lot of emotional stuff. It's here. It's in our face. Our emotional world is manifesting itself in the physical world, and it is here to be dealt with, whether we want to deal with it or not. So I think that this is a cup that, or a card that can really help us kind of dial in on the confusing and convoluted collection of emotions that might be coming up throughout this week. Frustrating, melancholic, painful, and exalted and healing all at the same time, right? It's a lot. It's a lot. For our witchcraft this week, we could do any of the following. We could do some divining with fire, staying up all night, again, for our meteor showers. Doing any kind of sacred study, any and all contraction magic of all types is very appropriate, because right at the end of the week, we have our moon moving into Cancer. Uh, and the sun is in Cancer. So this is like a really potent time for doing contraction magic, reduction magic, reducing, eliminating, binding, stopping, ending, shrinking magic. And then also, when the moon moves into Cancer, we might be feeling like it's time for chill and no magic at all. So just listen to your intuition on that and go with what feels right. For our journaling prompts this week, I don't know. Do some sacred study. I'm going to push it back to that again, I think. If you have a teacher, if you have a guru, a mentor, uh, a, a a guide of some kind that you have been learning magic from, that you have been enlightened by or inspired by, or somebody from your past that you think of from when you were in grade school or high school or college or whatever level of schooling you submitted yourself to, that really changed the way that you thought about things. And it might be somebody that taught you things outside of a traditional schooling environment. Maybe there was somebody in community that really taught you a lot, that helped you come up, that changed your world, that educated you to the way that things are or could be. This might be a really great time to reach out to them, to write a letter to them. Maybe you send it, maybe you don't. That's up to you. But this is a week for that. That's what I would say I think is appropriate for our witches work and for our journal prompts this week. All right, my friends. That, I think, is fucking plenty. I don't know. It seems like a lot. Thanks for taking this wild ass journey with me. 100 episodes. What? Crazy. Yeah, thanks for taking this journey with me. And I am excited to see where it goes next. There's always something on the horizon, right? Way, way out there on the horizon. But I'm excited to see where this goes next. So thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for being a part of this process and a part of this journey, because this is me exploring this stuff too. I'm learning right along with you. And so also thanks for being with me in a place where I am experimenting, where I am learning, where I am trying things out, and allowed to be vulnerable in that process. It's been really, really cool. And I'm excited for what is coming next. All right, my friends, good luck out there. Drink some water. Blessed be.